Tonight we examine a case that has transcended the boundaries of a criminal investigation to become one of the most significant geopolitical enigmas of the 21st century. For years, the names contained within the Jeffrey Epstein files were shielded by layers of legal privilege and international jurisdictional hurdles. But as the seal is finally broken on thousands of pages of testimony, the implications are moving far beyond the borders of a Manhattan courtroom. What we are looking at is not merely a chronicle of individual misconduct, but a potential map of influence-peddling that reaches into the highest echelons of global governance, intelligence, and finance. Tonight, we peel back the layers of the Epstein network to understand how private leverage becomes a matter of international security. This is an investigation into the architecture of power. To understand the gravity of the current document releases, we must first look at the unique socio-political vacuum in which Jeffrey Epstein operated. This was not a localized phenomenon. Epstein's reach was inherently global, spanning from the financial hubs of London and New York to the sovereign wealth of the Middle East and the scientific corridors of Europe. Historically, the Epstein case is rooted in the golden era of the 1990s and early 2000s, a period of rapid globalization where private billionaires often acted as unofficial intermediaries between states. During this time, the lines between private enterprise and public diplomacy became increasingly blurred. Epstein positioned himself as a facilitator, a man who occupied the gray space between traditional diplomacy and high-level finance. Politically, the background is defined by the players involved. We are looking at a cross-section of the Western establishment. On one side, you have the British monarchy, represented most prominently by Prince Andrew. This connection brought the scandal into the realm of constitutional crisis, challenging the stability of one of the world's oldest institutions. On the other side, you have the American political apparatus, with ties spanning multiple administrations, from the Clinton era to the Trump presidency. But the context extends further. There is the economic dimension, specifically Epstein's management of billions in assets for figures like Leslie Wexner, the head of a retail empire. This provided the hard power necessary to gain entry into exclusive circles. Furthermore, we must address the intelligence context. For decades, analysts have debated whether Epstein's operations were purely criminal, or if they served as a mechanism for information gathering. This brings us to the concept of kompromat, a term long used in international relations to describe compromising material used for blackmail. When individuals with access to classified state secrets or massive economic levers are found in compromising positions, it ceases to be a private matter. It becomes a systemic vulnerability for the nations they represent. The tension here is not just about justice for the victims, which remains the primary moral imperative, but about the integrity of international alliances. How do nations interact when their leaders are potentially compromised by a shared secret? This is the background of a story that threatens to rewrite the history of the last 30 years of global leadership. Here is where things stand today. We are currently navigating a phased release of documents, thousands of pages of previously sealed depositions, emails and police reports stemming from the 2015 civil lawsuit filed by Virginia Giuffre. The timeline of the recent weeks has been a relentless succession of disclosures. For years, these individuals were referred to only as John Does or Jane Does. Now, the names are being restored to the record. What we are seeing is a meticulous unmasking of the social registry of the 2000s. Among the confirmed facts in the latest tranches are detailed testimonies regarding the presence of high-profile figures at Epstein's residences in New York, Palm Beach, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have seen the names of former presidents, Nobel-winning scientists, and international heads of state appear not necessarily as defendants, but as participants in a social ecosystem that was fundamentally predatory. One of the major turning points in the current development is the increased scrutiny on the role of Ghislaine Maxwell. Her conviction in 2021 was a catalyst, but the current documents are providing the connective tissue that was missing during her trial. We are now seeing the specific ways in which the recruitment of victims was intertwined with the hosting of global elites. Official statements have been cautious but revealing. The U.S. Department of Justice has faced intense pressure to explain why certain avenues of the investigation were not pursued earlier. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, the fallout for the royal family continues to escalate as the documents corroborate parts of the testimony that led to Prince Andrew's removal from public duties. What makes these developments breaking news today is the sheer volume of data. Investigative journalists and legal analysts are currently cross-referencing these new names with flight logs from Epstein's private aircraft, the Lolita Express. This cross-referencing is revealing a pattern of movement that aligns with major global events, G8 summits, World Economic Forum meetings, and high-level philanthropic retreats. The narrative is no longer just about the crimes of one man. It is about a documented infrastructure of access. Every name released represents a new lead in a global web. And while the presence of a name in these files does not inherently equate to criminal guilt, the political guilt by association is causing tremors in capitals around the world. We are seeing a cleansing of the record, where the myth of the untouchable elite is being challenged by the cold reality of sworn testimony. But the bigger question now is, what does this mean for the future of global power? To understand the strategic implications, we must move beyond the headlines and look at the motivations of the key players. From a geopolitical perspective, the Epstein network functioned as a dark mirror to official diplomacy. In a traditional state-to-state interaction, there are protocols, records, and accountability. In the Epstein network, those protocols were replaced by extreme privacy and, allegedly, the collection of leverage. Think of it as a form of asymmetric influence. If a foreign power or a private entity possesses compromising information on a sitting judge, a senator, or a monarch, that information is more valuable than any lobbyist's donation. It becomes a tool for steering policy, influencing judicial outcomes, or securing multi-billion-dollar contracts. This is why intelligence agencies worldwide have followed this case with such intensity. The potential for these files to contain state-level secrets is a significant risk to international stability. What makes this situation more complex is the transatlantic strain. The Epstein case has placed a unique burden on the U.S.-UK relationship. As American courts release documents that implicate British figures, it creates a diplomatic friction that is difficult to manage through standard channels. Furthermore, we must analyze the economic risk. Epstein was deeply embedded in the world of venture capital and hedge funds. The names appearing in the files include some of the most powerful figures in Silicon Valley and Wall Street. If these individuals are forced to step down or if their firms face massive litigation, it could lead to significant market volatility. We are talking about the gatekeepers of the global digital economy. There is also the soft power consequence. For decades, the West has exported a narrative of the rule of law and human rights. The revelation that such a massive, predatory network could operate in plain sight for decades, often with the tacit protection of various authorities, erodes the moral authority of Western institutions. This is a strategic gift to adversarial nations who seek to portray Western democracies as hypocritical or inherently corrupt. In this expert-level breakdown, we see that the Epstein files are not just a criminal docket. They are a threat assessment. The risk is that the network persists in other forms. If the mechanism for this influence was never fully dismantled, only the man at the center of it, then the vulnerability remains. The power moves we are seeing today, from the sudden resignation of CEOs to the quiet retirement of politicians, are the defensive maneuvers of a system trying to survive its own exposure. So where do we go from here? The realistic scenarios are twofold. First, we can expect a legal cascade. The unsealing of these documents is likely to trigger a new wave of civil litigation and potentially criminal referrals. As more victims feel empowered by the public record, the pressure on prosecutors to bring charges against enablers will become politically unavoidable. Second, we are likely to see a shift in global transparency standards. There is already movement in various legislatures to close the loopholes that allowed Epstein to hide behind non-disclosure agreements and offshore accounts. This case may be the catalyst for a more aggressive approach to monitoring how private wealth interacts with public power. However, the global implications are sobering. The Epstein files have exposed a crisis of trust. When the public sees that the mechanisms of justice are delayed for the powerful while being swift for the marginalized, the social contract is weakened. The stability of international relations relies on the predictability and integrity of its leaders. If those leaders are perpetually shadowed by the ghost of this network, that stability is compromised. This situation matters because it reminds us that true power often operates in the spaces we are told not to look. The gravity of the Epstein story is not found in the salacious details, but in the realization of how easily the world's most powerful people were brought into a single, dark orbit. The era of secrecy is closing, but the era of accountability is only just beginning. We will continue to monitor the filings as they are released. I'm Elizabeth Grant. Thank you for joining us for this special report. Good night.